thanks to our sponsors and our steering committee. Without the sponsorship and support from these individuals, we would not be able to do the work that we do. We would not be able to host these meetings, different convenings, and provide some of the resources that we have. So a huge thank you to these folks, and as well, thank you to our steering committee for all of the guidance and support and kind of pushing our mission along. We would not be able to do this without your insight. So thank you very much. And for anyone who has not met me before, or I'm not a familiar face, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Caitlin Blockus, and I'm a project manager here at Valley Vision over broadband and digital equity. Some of you may recognize me. I formerly worked in our workforce development impact area. But as many of you know, workforce development and broadband digital equity often go hand in hand. So I've been working in this department for about 8 months now. So great to meet you all and excited to work together further. And before we kick off our meeting, I'll just go over some quick housekeeping here. I think everyone is muted already, but if you are not, please go ahead and mute your microphones. I love your cats, dogs, babies, nephews, but don't necessarily want to hear them this morning, maybe later on. But we will have some time for Q&A, and please also direct any questions that you have in the chat or raise your virtual hand. You'll be called upon and we'll definitely have some time to discuss, so please feel free to do that. And just so you know, this meeting will be recorded and it will be provided with all of the post-meeting materials. So a recording of this meeting, a slide deck, including all of our slides and our wonderful guest speaker slides coming up. So you'll have access to all of that. We'll be emailing it out after the meeting. And we also post everything on our website. And we'll drop a link to that a little bit later on, but everything can be found there. So no worries about if you're going to receive the slides or not, you will get everything. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and review our agenda. So you are here with me for some introductions and icebreaker. In a second here, I'm going to kick it over to our phenomenal guest speaker, Amanda Bergson-Shilcock from the National Skills Coalition, who will be sharing. We'll have a little bit of time for Q&A, and then we'll go over a couple different regional announcements. And then Navreet on our team will give a wonderful overview of the federal and state funding and state digital equity plan updates and some different things that are going on. We'll also hear from a member of our steering committee. And then we will close out. As usual, I am passionate about getting folks out right at our 12:30 end time. I want everyone to eat a good lunch and take some time to yourself. So we will close promptly at 12:30. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Amanda Bergson-Shilcock of the National Skills Coalition. They just produced a phenomenal report on closing the digital skill divide, and which found that over 92% of jobs in America require digital skills. But Amanda is much more of an expert on that than me. So I will go ahead and pass it over to her, and she'll be sharing a presentation from her end. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Great. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm Amanda Bergson-Shilcock. I'm joining you today from Philadelphia, although I do a lot of work in California. And I'm just going to mention that we've had some high winds here today and my internet has already gone out once. So if that happens, I will rejoin from my cell phone. And our colleagues, I have just emailed Navreet a copy of my slides so that if anything goes down tech-wise, she'll be able to share them from her end. So we are doing digital skills in action here. So just by way of background, I started teaching digital skills in the mid-90s in my local public library outside of Philadelphia. And at that point, we were teaching people email, FTP, and this new thing called the World Wide Web, which some of you may have heard of. And that was digital inclusion work in the mid-90s, right? Really helping folks to just navigate this very brand new world of digital access. We didn't even really use online as a term then, right? Only in the early 2000s did that really start to become a widespread term. So that's my background in doing this work. And I have the pleasure now to work for a nonprofit bipartisan workforce advocacy coalition. So we have about 20,000 members across the country, including many, many, many California members. And they are workforce boards and community colleges, community-based nonprofits, digital inclusion practitioners, local government agencies, state government officials, chambers of commerce, industry associations, labor unions, really anyone with an interest in workforce development, and in particular in jobs that require more than a high school diploma, but not a 4-year degree. And so what I'm going to share with you today, as Caitlin was just mentioning, are some top-line findings from our new report that we just put out, and some California-specific data as well. So the report that we released is a national report. It had a couple of state appendices with a couple of states that we just highlighted as diverse examples, but I've pulled some unpublished California-specific data to share with all of you. So as you've already been reassured, not only is today's session being recorded, but you will also have PDF copies of these slides, and you are warmly welcome to use them in your own presentations and share them with your own partners. I'll also share a Dropbox with some infographics from this report in case any of you want to use those in your social media. Okay, so that sort of walks you through who I am and why I'm here today and what we're going to talk about. You know this already, but I say it every time and I'm going to say it again. The digital divide is not just about broadband and hardware, as important as those issues are. It is also very much about digital skills. And because we're a workforce organization, we know that oftentimes when people enroll in digital skill building classes, they say they want to get a job or get a better job. Those are huge motivating factors for people in pursuing digital skills. So we said, okay, let's do an analysis to better understand what are the kinds of job skills that employers are looking for, right? So we looked at 43 million help wanted ads from 2021. And across all of those, there were about 15,000 distinct skills that were mentioned by employers. We took the top half of those skills, which covers actually 99% of all jobs, and we hand coded them based on whether they required a kind of digital skill or not. Our research partners on this project were the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. You can see their disclaimer on the slide here. The conclusions and recommendations and opinions expressed here are definitely those of National Skills Coalition as the author and not of the Federal Reserve System. So here's our top line finding. 92% of all jobs in the US require definitely or likely digital skills. Definitely digital skills are kind of a no-brainer. You're looking at this going, oh yeah, Excel, Python, I've heard of those. Likely digital skills, things like bookkeeping. You could do that on pen and paper with a ledger, but most people these days are using a computer to do it, right? And then there are not digital skills for childcare or elder care workers, for example, that also show up. And California is even higher than national averages, right? So the national average for jobs requiring a definitely digital skill is half of all jobs, just under that at 47%. California is actually at 51%. And basically at the national average for likely digital skills at 91%. So let's talk about what some of these look like, right? This includes everything from ag workers who now need to be able to work on combine harvesters or tractors that have onboard technology, firefighters who are using software. I was shocked the other day that the US Department of the Interior posted about wildland firefighters needing to use mobile technology in the field, right? I think of wildland firefighting as a very physical job, but these days it also requires digital skills. Utility workers, sound mixers, we know the entertainment industry is so important in California. Medical office staff, we see that non-clinical staff like the receptionist who used to check you in person at the doctor's office is now increasingly having to be a telehealth specialist who can support the doctor and the patient in accessing the telehealth technology. Construction workers, overwhelmingly, we talked to one construction company that said their frontline workers need to use 3 to 5 different mobile apps every day. Even in fast food, we see that White Castle is experimenting with using a cobot, that's a collaborative robot, named Flippy in some of its stores. This is another cobot, collaborative robot system that is a palletizer. It takes heavy boxes of frozen meat and stacks them into pallets. And so the workers in these jobs, which don't even require a high school diploma, need to be able to interact with the HMI, the human machine interface, right? And we see that Boeing and Airbus and other aerospace companies are using augmented reality. Some of you may be very familiar with augmented reality. For some of you, it might be a new term. If you've ever used a Snapchat filter, or if you've ever used the IKEA app to see how their furniture would fit in your apartment or your house, you have used augmented reality. And of course, we see in warehousing and logistics, such a huge industry in some parts of California, digital order picking and inventory tools are very common. So across industries, we see this enormous demand for digital skills. And this is important as all of us are thinking about the state digital equity planning process happening now and the digital inclusion work that I know that many of you are engaged in on the ground. We see that even for jobs that require very little work experience, 0 to 2 years of work experience, there is still an overwhelming demand for digital skills. And the same goes for jobs that require a high school diploma or jobs that require an associate's degree. This is national data, but my guess is that California data would be actually even a couple of percentage points higher, certainly on the definitely digital skills. Some folks say, well, isn't this a problem that the retirement calendar is going to solve? As older workers retire, then younger workers will come in, and younger workers are all digital natives, and we won't have to worry about upskilling people. That is not true at either count. First of all, it's unfair to older workers, many of whom are pretty comfortable and fluent with technology. But second of all, many younger workers, like workers of all ages, have fragmented knowledge. So they're comfortable with some digital skills, but not comfortable with others. So for example, they might be very good at sending text messages or using a video app on their phone. That does not mean that they're comfortable navigating an electronic medical record or creating a budget spreadsheet. And so people of all ages need opportunities to build from the skills they have to the skills they need. And that's where workforce development providers, adult education groups, higher education groups, and digital inclusion practitioners really come in as important partners. We also see that small and mid-sized businesses have almost as high a demand for workers with digital skills as large businesses. And this is important because if you're a big company, you can have your own in-house training program, or you can walk down the street to your local community college and say, hey, can you create a customized training program? Because I have 30 workers in this job role that I'm hiring for, and I want them to have these skills. But if you're a small company, if you've got 20 employees, even if you're a mid-sized company with 100, 150, more than that, you probably don't have the bandwidth to do that. And so you're really depending on your public and community partners, the workforce system, the adult schools and adult education system, the community college system, the nonprofit digital inclusion and other advocacy partners to help you get workers with the skills that you need and to help workers have the skills they need so that they can get good jobs and support their families. And indeed, we see the data is very clear. More digital skills means higher wages. So if you move from a job that requires no digital skills to a job that requires even one definitely digital skill, the median hourly wage goes up by 23%. That is a difference that anybody would notice in their paycheck. It's about $8,000 a year at the median wage levels that we're looking at here. And if I spread out this chart and I showed you what the wages look like for jobs that require 3, 5, 7, 9 different digital skills, you would see that it goes up in a perfect stair step. So every time more digital skills are required, the median wage goes up. And you might be sitting here thinking, yeah, but how many jobs really require 9 different digital skills? The answer is there are 2.1 million jobs in our data set that require 9 different digital skills. So it's not a small percentage. And we see these notable salary bumps as folks move up. And of course, as people earn more money, they are typically contributing more in tax revenue. They're usually spending more, so there are consumption spillover economic effects, and there are direct taxes paid in the form of wage and income taxes. These are numbers using California as the reference point. We know that folks need both foundational digital skills. So can you download and install a new app on your phone? Are you comfortable using two-factor authentication? Can you set up and use an email account for yourself? Can you use basic office software like spreadsheet tools or PowerPoint? But foundational skills by themselves are not enough. Overwhelmingly, employers are also looking for people with industry-specific skills. So it would be doing people a disservice to suggest that the only thing they need is to have a kind of basic foundational digital skills class. For most folks, particularly because they often say they're enrolling in digital skills classes because they want to get a job or they want to get a better job, we really want to make sure they have opportunities to build these kinds of industry-specific skills. So some that are in particularly high demand here in California, probably no surprise, electronic health records, dental practice management software, a huge demand, which I was a bit surprised by. In the manufacturing field, we see big demand for ERP or enterprise resource planning software, the stuff that's put out by Oracle or SAP, a lot of robotics in the manufacturing sector. So these are just a handful of examples that we pulled from the California data. And above everything, people need transferable skills and a sense of agency and self-efficacy, right? A sense of agency, meaning they have control over their own learning and their own lives and their own ability to navigate learning opportunities. And self-efficacy, which is more than just confidence, right? Confidence is, okay, I know I can do this. But self-efficacy is, in part, I know how I can do this and I know how to respond when I'm in an unfamiliar situation. Because the reality is that technology is changing so fast that no class or training program can ever fully prepare someone. And so part of the goal is to make people be comfortable in novel digital situations, a case that they haven't experienced before, but they can figure out, okay, how is this similar to something I have done before and what can I learn from that? So I've just given you a huge amount of research data and findings from our report and our study. We also have some recommendations for how state and local leaders can take advantage of this. And when I saw your names and your organizations in the check-in in the chat, as folks were working on this check-in, I saw that you're representing a lot of different types of organizations. And so some of these recommendations may be directly relevant to your day job. Some of them may be a little far afield. So keep that in mind as you're listening. And when we get to the Q&A portion, I'd love to hear from any of you if these recommendations are not relevant to your daily field, if there are particular questions that you have given your job and your role. So let's talk a little bit about our recommendations. The first is kind of a no-brainer, right? We are strongly encouraging you as local advocates to be part of your state's digital equity and BEAD planning processes to make sure that a portion of that funding is invested in digital skills, right? Again, broadband is critically important. I'm never going to say that it's not. Devices, super important. You don't want people to be sharing one smartphone among 4 family members or parents trying to use their child's Chromebook to do their own work or study on. So investing in skills is really important with this big new federal funding that's coming to California. And then making sure that your state digital equity plan and any local plans that you might be engaged in really take full advantage of federal guidelines that allow for basic, applied, and advanced digital skills training. Investing in industry sector partnerships. So these are groups that bring together 6 to 10 employers from the same industry. So it might be a group of hospitals or a group of small manufacturing companies, and they talk about their hiring needs. And that might sound kind of crazy, right? Why would you put competitors in the same room to talk to each other about what kind of hiring needs they have? But for these small companies, they recognize they don't have the bandwidth to do all the training themselves. And they'd really like the opportunity to talk with peers and to talk with their education and training partners about how to create a training program that's really going to be a win-win for workers and small businesses alike. You can combine census data with the findings from our study to identify gaps in digital skill building for particular covered populations. Many of you probably know these by heart, but in the Federal Digital Equity Act, there are covered populations like people of color, low-income folks, rural residents, veterans, folks with disabilities. And for each covered population, the state is going to have to show how it has worked to close equity gaps for that covered population. We've included a couple of state examples in the appendix to our report showing how North Carolina or Illinois have used that census data to juxtapose it with our national findings, and California can do that too. And then supportive services. We know that things like childcare and transportation can be real barriers for people to be able to participate in an education or workforce program. And that's just as true with digital skills as it is anywhere else. So investing in those services is really important. So that's my quick tour through our research data and findings, as well as our recommendations. I've included a few additional slides, which I'm just going to briefly show you here before we get to the Q&A, that are really just reference slides for you to refer to or to share with your partners if this is not the kind of work that you're engaged in directly. A little bit about National Skills Coalition as an organization, a link to our full report, which I think Caitlin has also dropped into the chat, a set of our policy recommendations around the Digital Equity Act and BEAD, our past research on digital skills for different industries and good practices for helping people build digital skills, as well as this earlier report, which came out in February of 2020, a month before the world shut down and everyone realized anew how important digital skills were. We hope that if you have a minute, you'll sign on to our principles about digital equity. This is not lobbying. It's not regarding any particular legislation. So hopefully you have the authority to sign yourself as an individual onto our principles. And if you're able to come to the East Coast, we'd love to see you at our Skills Summit, which is our big annual event in May. So let me stop here. I'm going to take the slides off the screen so we can see each other. And I see that folks have been chiming in already in the chat. So I'm going to take a moment to catch up on chat questions and then open things up. Caitlin, I'm assuming folks can unmute themselves if they want to ask real voice, but they're also welcome to just drop questions into the chat.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll just add to Amanda, thank you for that amazing presentation. I really love hearing all of that data, and it's especially relevant for us and for anyone who is new to our coalition. Our coalition kind of was born out of a Brookings report that was done in 2018. I'll drop it in the chat here just shortly, but this report looked at Sacramento and compared it to some other, what they call middleweight cities across the United States. And it found that 3/4 of the occupations in the Sacramento region require a high or medium level of digital skills, which was really that kind of the spark that ignited our coalition. So this data is just incredibly relevant for us. I'll drop that in the chat, but wanted to give that as a primer for anyone new here. We're just obsessed with everything that you've shared with us, Amanda, and it's so interesting to have that data to back it up. And I see we have a question from L Ozarin or Dr. Ozarin in the chat here. It's a little lengthy. Dr. Ozarin, do you want to share or ask Amanda verbally?
Sure.
I can
Basically, we obviously all agree that we need to ensure everyone has access to broadband, but my question is far off in the future about when we're successful and the potential for unintended consequences. Because employers have to pay up for people with more skills because there are fewer of them, if we flatten the skill set, will that actually depress wages?
So the short answer is there's a lot of factors that go into wage levels. Some of it has to do with how many people are in the labor force. Some of it has to do with the skill set of that labor force. Some of it has to do with other factors in the economy that are causing employers to have to kind of bid up the price of labor. yeah, anytime you're making any adjustments in the flow, there could be consequences. I think it's important to recognize, though, that any investments that we're making in folks' digital skills now are really about responding not just to the landscape as it exists today, but to the landscape as it's going to exist over the next 5-10 years of people's working lives. And there's a lot of variables that if you'd asked any of us 5 years ago about the labor market, we would not have been able to predict, right? We have 2.1 million fewer folks in the labor market because of disability issues, because of long COVID and other things that we didn't even know the pandemic was going to happen if you'd asked us 5 years ago, right? We had women leaving the workforce in droves at the beginning of the pandemic. We have women coming back to the workforce even more so than men now. And so we have a higher labor force participation rate increase for women than we did for men. There are efforts around salary transparency that are helping to close racial equity gaps in wage levels. So there's a lot of confounding factors, and I would not want to see any concerns about wage level stop us from investing in people's digital skills.
Completely agree. That wasn't the point of the question. The point of the question was, are there things we need to be doing in parallel to ensure that we don't do that?
Yeah, and I guess some of them are probably within my scope to comment on, and my guess is there are other people much better than me to comment on some of them. I think one of the questions is, to what end, right? Are we giving people skills that they can prepare for the job they currently have, or are we helping them make an entire new industry or make their current industry more competitive by building in an area? And I'll give two quick examples, right? When software engineers at Twitter created, well, they weren't actually at Twitter at the time, I don't think, but when the Vine video app was first created, it was created primarily by white software engineers, and they envisioned a certain kind of use case for it. And then African-American teenagers took the Vine app and ran with it and said, okay, you made a 7-second video app. Here are all the creative things I can think of that I can do with this app around music, around public health, around, bonding with each other and friends in different cities, right? And then that grew into being a product that inspired the product that we all know as TikTok today, right? Well, there's lots of feelings about TikTok. I'm not saying pro or con, TikTok as a company, but that's an entire market niche that got developed in part because a group of teenagers said, oh, wait a minute, I see how I can take this technology and run with it and do something new. There are certainly concerns about how to make sure people don't get exploited so that their ingenuity and creativity does not get taken advantage of by bad actors or by folks who wouldn't give them credit for their ingenuity and exploration. And I think that's an important conversation to have. And that's one that there are lots of people who are thinking and working on this issue who are not me, who will be wonderful for you to have as guest speakers to help think through some of those variables. But then the other piece of the puzzle, right, is there stuff that we can't now imagine that's probably going to be standard in 5 years, right? My 12-year-old niece does beauty tutorials on YouTube. Not that she's performing them, she's watching them. And L'Oreal Cosmetics has one of the most robust digital transformation career pathways of companies that I've studied in the US. They're a beauty company, they're a global company, and they have a career promotion pathway. So that if you're working in a retail store as a retail sales associate selling beauty products, you can figure out what are your digital skills that you need to get to climb the career ladder at L'Oreal. That's the kind of thing that I would love to see more of, because what people say is they want some sense of predictability and stability. They want to trust that if they build a skill, that it'll really pay off for them and they won't get cheated or see a disappointing return, right? Which I think is part of the underlying point of your question, right? How do we make sure that if we train people, they really get the wage rewards that we're talking about and hoping for, and that they don't wind up disappointed and frustrated? And the very last thing I will say is there are procurement things that local and state government can do in terms of setting wage floors, in terms of buying local for certain kinds of products, in terms of providing upskilling for their own workforces. And so to the extent that any of you are either working in local government or are engaged in that procurement process in any way, you can think about your actions in terms of setting floors and making sure that there are levels that folks are actually seeing the economic rewards for this that we all want to see them achieve.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And I think that the answer to the question that you posed at the very top of that was both, right? We want them to excel at what they're doing and be prepared to move into something new.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Dr. Ozarin. I want to move forward and ensure we have time for everyone's great questions that are popping up in the chat. I'll tee up next from Manuel Martinez. Is there a defined basic set of applications that people should be comfortable with? And I know you referenced some of this in your presentation, Amanda, but curious if you can expand on that.
Yeah, so the short answer is there's not one single standardized set. I do think the Seattle Digital Equity Framework, which is publicly available, is a really nice one in terms of kind of thinking about these issues in a thoughtful and rigorous way. And the Federal Digital Resilience in the American Workforce, or DRAW project, has also put out some really beautiful, very user-friendly resources. And I will email those to Caitlin after today's call so that she can send them out to all of you. The kind of baseline of foundational skills, the one thing I would say is it should absolutely be much more about self-efficacy and comfort with different types of the same foundational skill rather than fixating on one particular software product or vendor, right? So I just talked to a guy who's in Louisville, Kentucky, who is teaching digital skills to currently incarcerated people. So they're in jail, not even prison, they're just in local jails, and they have no internet access. So he's doing this using digital devices that they're running an operating system designed for work in developing countries that have spotty internet access. And he's teaching them using the LibreOffice technology and then showing them, hey, this will work in Google Docs, this will work in Microsoft Word, so that as they get out into the world, once they're released from jail, they'll be able to take that foundational digital skills knowledge and say, oh, I know how to do bolding text and creating bulleted point lists in LibreOffice. Is not a different process in any great sense in Word or Google Docs, right? So that's a thing to keep in mind. I will also say that there's kind of an arms race happening right now around assessments. Every individual vendor has their own assessment for digital skills, but one that you might be interested in if you're not already quite familiar, and my guess is that some of you are, is the North Star Digital Literacy Assessment, which assesses at least one set of foundational skills. And it was developed by a nonprofit in Minnesota. So it's a little bit less worrisome from a standpoint of, potentially exploiting people and it's pretty low cost. So if you're not already familiar with it, it's at least one place to start. I see we have other questions. So Caitlin, let me turn it back to you to flag the next question.
Absolutely. And Amanda, I am thrilled to share with you that we actually, through our digital skills and digital literacy working group of this coalition, identified North Star as a really excellent assessment, and our workforce boards recently adopted it. So I always let the great minds think alike train is really running for all of us here with North Star. This is a little similar to your last question, but kind of digs into a little bit more of the analysis. And this is from Joseph Taylor. And Joseph, please feel free if I'm butchering your question here to join verbally as well. But Joseph asks, do you have any details in the analysis that breaks out digital skills in more detail? In your example of definitely digital skills, some of the things used were Microsoft Excel and Python. In practice, we can help develop skills in Excel faster than Python. Did you identify a taxonomy or complexity of differentiation within the topic of digital skills?
So the short answer is no. I would have loved to have done that because I love having my hands in the data and spending time on it. But this project already took 9 months from conception to birth. And I was like, okay, we got to get this thing out the door so people can pay attention to it. There are other folks who are working on this challenge. And I will say there's kind of two pieces to the puzzle. The first is, how accurate are the job postings that employers are putting out there? And they're pretty accurate in terms of very generically saying, like, I want Excel skills, or I want you to be able to use electronic health record software. Sometimes they'll name the vendor like Epic or something, but they're not at all helpful in terms of the granularity of those skills. And I have had off the record conversations with chief learning officers and learning and development people at very large companies in the US, and almost all of them are trying to figure this stuff out in-house because there isn't any publicly available standardized way for them to think about this. So for example, one large company that's a retailer whose name you would recognize said, okay, well, we bought a Coursera contract and a LinkedIn learning contract, and then we also have some in-house learning modules, and we're trying to map those to the competencies that our workers need to have, but it's a game of, musical chairs because the things are changing so rapidly. So that is a challenge, right? The first challenge is that employers themselves are not fully clear on the needs or the granularity of the specific digital skill needs. But then the second challenge, and this is one that maybe some of you can help solve, is if we'd had more time with the data, or if I'd had additional funding to do a second research study, we could have, gone deeper into the data that is collected by data brokers like Lightcast or others who are scraping and analyzing help wanted ads, to be able to kind of zoom in on some of the data that is there and do some qualitative interviews to round out what the quantitative data is telling us. But the interim step, I would say, is talk to the people in your community, maybe in your career technical education system, maybe in your workforce boards, maybe in your community college system writ large. Talk to the people who are already in conversation with employers and push them to get more granular and useful data from their employer partners, because that's what can help you as a training provider or educator to be able to make more informed decisions. That real-time on-the-ground data from the folks who are already in conversation with employers in your community is going to be more useful to you than probably anything I, as a national researcher, can tell you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And I think we've gone through some of our questions in the chat. So I want to open up this time if anyone has any, further questions for Amanda, anything to expand on while we have her expertise with us today.
And I will also welcome if anybody wants to brag about cool stuff they're doing. I love to hear people brag about cool stuff they're doing. So if there are digital skills examples that you want to share, either in the chat or real voice, please go to town.
Early last week, we did a workshop at the Educating Careers Conference, mainly as far as on WebGIS, but one of our presenters was the recently retired chief consultant for the Assembly Committee on Jobs, Economic Development and the Economy. As mainly her main role was the importance of WebGIS as a workforce tool, but she also more broadly as far as on digital skill sets, and she did very much advocate in K-12 to really, the more digital skills, the more digital apps that the kids become familiar with is very much a value because there is rapidity of change, and it is more that of not just learning those digital apps, but learning and developing the instinct of how to learn new ones.
Exactly.
And I think when this group, and I don't know how long it made the decision to drop looking at K-12, I think it was a real disservice on the agenda that what we have, because we definitely need to be, pushing and getting our K-12 institutions to a set of digital skills much broader than they currently are. And that is only going to be done by outside pressure.
Yeah, I mean, there's very much a both and issue here, right? The K-12 system is important. The coming generation of workers is important, but also the adult workers who are currently in the system are critically important. I see we have a hand from Christy and also another hand from Danielle. So maybe Christy.
Hi there. Good morning. First of all, great questions, conversation. Thank you, Amanda and Caitlin, for hosting this. I've been trying to figure out how to frame this question, so I'm just going to spew it out and see how it lands. But I think to what you just said about there's also a big population of the adult workforce that also still needs a lot of digital education and conversation and inclusion. My question is around artificial intelligence, which is rapidly being integrated everywhere and putting employees all over out of business, or not necessarily out of business, but replacing certain types of jobs. And my question is around, are there any current organizations that you know of or work with that you'd recommend who are offering AI education, digital education, about how it's being currently used, and how we can also help educate those who are still digitally savvy, but in understanding how these ways can also help exacerbate the digital divide for equity as we currently already are?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is the smartest, most thoughtful engineers and thinkers talking about this are all Black women who have been kind of calling the alarm on the challenges around AI for a long time. So people like Timnit Gebru and Safiya Noble, who've written on, and Ruha Benjamin, who wrote, Race After Technology. So those thinkers are people at a really high level that I would encourage everybody to be reading and listening to, because they're kind of the canary in the coal mine for saying, okay, there's a lot of folks jumping on the bandwagon of AI right now, and that's understandable. It's the hot new cute thing, fine. But there's a lot of both underlying ethical questions and questions about, how good this is really going to be, right? There's a wonderful nonprofit website called askamanager.org, and they just had a discussion this week about if you are a public relations and communications person and your client says to you, oh, we've produced an AI chat GPT version of the document, you can just edit it, it'll be fine. How do you have the conversation with your client about actually it's much more work to go back and fix a computer generated thing in which the AI may have hallucinated the text and come up with something that's completely not true, rather than fixing a human's errors, which probably just have, grammar and spelling problems, right? So that's a whole sort of sector of this discussion, which again, I am not the person most qualified to talk about it. And there are people who are thinking and talking about it. On the flip side of who's teaching AI skills, I do think that thinking about marginalized workers and learners as architects of their own learning and use of technology is really important, because you don't want people to be in the position of sort of being passive recipients of being kind of imposed upon by the technology, right? And so there certainly are people who are kind of trying to teach AI techniques, but do it with that lens of community ownership of data and ethical guardrails about how data is gathered and used. So I will follow up in my email to Caitlin with some other names of folks that I think are working and learning on this issue, because I don't want to be presumptuous and suggest that I have answers in this realm. It is changing literally week by week here in terms of, oh, can we use AI to write legal contracts? Oh my God, what if the AI gave bad legal advice? It's a big mess. I want to get to Danielle's question before we have to move on here. So Danielle?
Listening to all this, it's so hard, because then my brain starts it goes more into, I don't even know what my original question was anymore. I was looking at the chat and I saw Joseph Taylor's comment about digital skills and expanding on what that even means. And it just made me think of, our project that we're doing here in San Diego with our digital health navigators. And we're thinking about digital skills and trying to teach them digital skills and all these things that I didn't think about, because we think about basic in different ways. And so when I have a group of women who don't know how to type out the @ symbol, that's different. And that's not even, I don't feel like that's encompassed in our digital skills talk ever, about below this basic level. We're talking about Word and we're talking about Excel, but if they can't type the @ sign, they don't have an email address, they don't have all these other things. The digital divide is so big, and I don't know. I don't even know what to, it's just, it's hard at this point but I do think, like you just said, involving the community is paramount. It is the most important thing to do, is to ask people what they want, what they are trying to achieve, so to help them to get there versus telling them what they need to do.
And that's the beautiful thing about humans, right? We are social learners, we learn in community, and we are most driven by something that we are intrinsically motivated by. For a lot of people, that's, I want to set a good example for my kids, or I want to be able to communicate with my kid's teacher, or, you know, I want to have a telehealth appointment with a doctor because I live in a rural community and I can't get there in person, right? And so taking that driving, motivating factor and then that's the beauty of really good digital navigator services, right? Is supporting folks in developing the kind of community relationships that mean that when someone's ready to learn the next step, you have a grandparent who wants to video chat with their grandchild, that somebody's right there to do it. And so I will also send Caitlin, I'm writing myself notes here. There's a rural library in Utah called Tueli Library, and they've developed this Digital Me program, which is a very basic digital skill building program that is really inclusive and beautiful. And I recommend it as something to borrow from, learn from, think about. There's also a guy named Anson Green, who used to be the director of adult education for the entire state of Texas and is now running digital skill building for Tyson Foods. Now, Tyson Foods is a Fortune 100 employer. They have 120,000 frontline workers, 60 to 70% of whom are immigrants and refugees. It's hard, messy, dirty work. All of us probably have opinions about poultry processing jobs and what they're like, right? But it is increasingly jobs that require digital skills. And Anson is doing some really interesting work on supporting folks who speak, you know, a Burmese language like Karen as their first language. They don't know the Roman alphabet. They're trying to create passwords using special characters, and there isn't a word in their language that is easily translatable as special characters, right? So how do you do that? So there are some people who are working on that very like entry-level version, and I think they're thinking about it in really interesting and inclusive ways. So I can also send you, Anson has published some of the stuff that they're doing in their work at Tyson. So, and it looks like there's some other wonderful colleagues in chat who are chiming in with their examples. So I think there's probably a lot of wisdom among this group here. I'm here for just a couple more minutes, and I know you have other agenda items to get to. So Caitlin, let me kick it back to you and see if you want to take one more question or call it a day. Oh, sorry, I swear, this is the last thing.
Go ahead.
We have a problem, and I say this as someone who speaks 1.5 languages. Our digital skill assessments are wildly skewed towards English. And so there's a lot of people in this country who speak languages other than English who have great digital skills, and we can't capture that because we don't have tests that can capture it. And I think it's really, really important not to conflate limited English proficiency with limited digital skills. Sometimes those are the same, but very often there are people who are doing sophisticated, nuanced things with technology even before they move to the US. So it's really important not to underestimate folks and think that just because they flunked an English language digital skills test, that says something about their digital skills. It probably says more about their English skills.
Thank you, Amanda. I think we have time for one more question. And while folks are brainstorming, I briefly want to, and maybe Renee, John from Valley Vision, I can tee you up, but our workforce development team has done some great events recently around AI and data science. But Renee, do you care to jump in and just contribute a little bit?
Yes, I just wanted to share that Valley Vision, as the regional workforce intermediary, does sector convenings with employers and industry. And one of the sectors that we support is information and communication technology. So I'm going to put a link in the chat here that leads to the page that looks at that sector. And we recently did an advisory that was looking at AI, data science, and machine learning. So there's some assets available to you if you're interested. There's the full event recording, or there's the presentation, which includes labor market information and projections and some skills information pulled out of Lightcast that Amanda referenced earlier. And then additionally, there's a meeting proceedings report. If you go to the second page of that, it'll have some key findings. If you're like, oh my gosh, too much information, just page 2 of the meeting proceedings report. But what I will say, one thing that we heard, and I think Mark referenced K through 12, and we've heard this in other sectors before, but very clearly heard this with information communication technology. The employers were saying if artificial intelligence can start being talked about in middle school, and getting socialized with students, because we need more diverse students interested in these fields and just understanding the concept of some of these things that are going to be, clearly shaping the future of work. We heard that a year ago when it came to the electric grid, because of what was changing in that sector. So we're definitely hearing that with information communication technology as well. So inclusive pipelines initiatives are really important. But anyway, there's some assets there for you. I love workforce. I live, eat, and breathe it all day, all the time. But I only know it on a regional perspective. If I can help you with anything locally, please let me know.
Thank you, Renee. That question just made the previous workforce side of my brain tingle, and I wanted to pitch that your way. One last question for Amanda from anyone.
Please don't be shy about emailing me to brag about your cool stuff. I've put my contact information in the slides. So I 100%, and also be skeptical. Like, if you disagree with something I said, this is a really fast changing new area. I do not have all the answers. I absolutely want to hear your pushback.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll, I think, Amanda, you have your email and slides too, and we'll provide all that to folks. But if something comes up, feel free to reach out to us or Amanda. And thank you so much, Amanda, for your presentation and your time and excellent responses to these questions. We really appreciate you cutting out time in your schedule to join us. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. We're gonna go ahead and get rolling. Thank you, Amanda. We have a couple different regional updates to share. So we're going to go ahead and share screen here. And I will actually pitch this over to Manuel Martinez from the city of Sacramento. They are doing an internet survey on broadband throughout the city, but what Manuel can definitely speak to this better than I can. So I will pitch it over to you, Manuel, to talk a little bit further about this.
Well, thank you, Kayla. So my name is Manuel Martinez. I'm with the city of Sacramento. This is actually being spearheaded through information technology. And what we've done is we reached out and hired Magellan, they're a consulting firm, national consulting firm, to help us with our broadband strategic plan. And so one of the items that they provided was an internet survey. And the internet survey, if I believe that's a link to the survey right there, I'm hoping. If not, I can, thank you. I was going to say I can put it in the chat. And what it is just collecting information and data, because we're looking for those internet gaps for either the underserved or non-served areas in Sacramento, so that we can then, how should I say, refine our broadband strategy with the hope of getting additional grant dollars for actual construction for broadband infrastructure. So please feel free to share it. The bigger sample we get, the better. And I know the obvious question is, of course, if there's no internet service, then how are they going to do the survey? But you can actually do the survey from a phone and other devices. And if it is geo-locked, so if you are outside the Sacramento area, we will just be able to see that additional information. It won't be part of it will be part of the sample, but we'll just basically be able to see the information that's identified outside the area. But yeah, that's what we're doing right now. Appreciate everybody just taking the survey when they get a chance, or sharing the information. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And
Manuel is on this survey. I would make a recommendation as far as or whatever you're using, but using the survey 123 within ArcGIS Online, so that data and the location, by placing an interactive map in there, that you may be able to skip a step in that analysis and being able to do that. That's something that we had talked about earlier, at least at school sites in Sacramento County, of picking a grade level and getting 1 or 2 teachers at each school to have their students fill out from a link at their homes to be able to capture that data.
And that was survey 123.
Hang on, yeah, that would be survey 123 within the ArcGIS Online system. So you may want, I know that the city of Sacramento does have some folks that deal with GIS and ArcGIS Online. So that might be a direction that you may want to explore and look at, and may provide you a better analysis of the data that you get.
Yeah, thank you.
thank you, Mark. And I want to make sure there's a couple questions in chat from Shanaz and Antonio. Manuel, do you know if the survey will be mailed or will it be provided in print in any locations?
I'm not aware that it's going to be provided in print. It was a short time frame. There's going to be additional, more than likely, an additional survey towards the end of our engagement with Magellan. But this was just the initial one, just to try to get some type of sample. And but to get it actually out in print and let's see at community centers, I'm sure that the survey is only going to be up for pretty much the end of March, and then it's actually going to be shut down.
Thank you so much. And I encourage folks for themselves and those in their communities. Renee, thank you for dropping a link to that survey in the chat here. And Manuel, thank you for joining us to speak on that a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and move us forward. I want to make sure that we cover everything on time here. But if any further questions arise, I'm hoping folks can address that in the chat. One thing I'm really excited to share with you all, and someone I'm excited to introduce you to, is Andy Urrutia, who is a program coordinator at Biteback, which just launched their Digital Navigator program in the Sacramento region. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Andy, to introduce yourself and give a little bit of information about the program.
Yeah, thank you, Caitlin. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you including me in the meeting. Sorry in advance, my voice is going to be going up and down. I'm a little bit under the weather, but yeah, like Caitlin said, I'm Andy Urrutia. I am the program coordinator for a nonprofit called Biteback. And for those who are not familiar with Biteback, and give a little bit overview, Biteback has been inclusively bridging the digital divide for about 25 years. They started in Washington, D.C. and launched a second site in Baltimore in 2019. Biteback is on track to expand to Sacramento, Miami, New Jersey, and Detroit by the end of 2023. Our mission is to close the digital divide by providing under-resourced communities an equitable pathway into the digital economy. We do this through transformative digital advocacy, digital literacy, and we also offer tech certification training. My hope for Biteback is to partner with organizations here in the Sacramento area. We hope that the community welcomes us. As I mentioned, we are fairly new. My goal for 2023 will be focused on training digital navigators, whether that be staff or volunteers from the community. I will also be focusing on facilitating ACP registration events to ensure that the community members in Sacramento take advantage of this great program. And for those who may not need the program, to at least for them to gain enough knowledge to pass it along to those who will need the program in advance. I also hope to get to know the community-based organizations and potentially create partnerships and help bridge the digital divide in our community. So that's a little bit about me and about Biteback. And if anyone has any more questions about the organization or about what we do here in Sacramento, I highly encourage you to reach out to me. And again, thank you. And thank you, Caitlin, for including me in the meeting.
Yeah, great to have you with us. Andy, I'm wondering if you can drop your email in the chat. I'm also totally happy to connect folks with Andy. He and I have been collaborating, and I'm excited to announce some future events we may be working on together, but I will let you all know about that as they arise. But super excited to have Andy with us. And for anyone who has that kind of itch in the back of their brain, like, oh, I've heard of Biteback. How do I know that? You might recognize the organization. We had Chrissy Powell, who's their chief information officer, on a panel for our coalition back in September of last year when they had announced their program. And if you're interested in learning a little bit like more in depth, Chrissy gave, I think it was a great like 20-minute overview on that is available on our website as well. So thank you so much, Andy. And I'm sure we will be seeing more of you soon. I'm going to go ahead and keep it rolling here, and I will pass it over to Navreet Handal from our team, who will be sharing some of the different funding overviews on state digital equity planning in California. And we'll be hearing from a couple other folks as well, but Navreet, I'll kick it over to you.
Of course, I'll keep it as brief as possible to make space for other people that I'll be teeing up, but just want to provide a quick funding overview for the state of California. And so this guide was created by NTIA. And so it pretty much gives an overview of the federal funding and how it's being managed within the state and kind of the available resources for any organizations involved in this work. So the first that we can see is 2 or 3 major kind of federal funding sources. So we have the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which are kind of highlighted in those top red boxes for both the CPUC and CDT. And so that has been a major funding resource for our state. And then also coming in is the BEAD, so the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment. And so California already has been awarded their amount, and I believe it's around 8 million, 9 million. I can be corrected on that. And then we also have coming in soon is, if you see on the California Department of Technology side, the State Digital Equity Planning Grant. And so the state is currently in the process of creating its digital equity plan and has been kind of outsourcing and looking for and holding a lot of workshops and just opportunities to kind of get the community involved and hear from this from Californians just on what the state plan should look like. And so we see these funding opportunities. The California Department of Technology is mainly kind of overseeing, as you can see, they're kind of on the Broadband for All site, if you've seen that, and they're just managing all kind of related funding and just kind of laying out the plan. And then if we see on the California Public Utilities Commission side, this is mainly kind of funding opportunities for CPUCs and other organizations. Valley Vision also does manage the Connected Capital Area Broadband Consortium. And so through that work, we do outreach, and we do work with ISPs and other organizations to kind of help them get involved and apply for these kind of, as we see on the left side, the CASIB resource fundings, just to kind of help roll out broadband even more within our 4-county region, which is California, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba. But there are other consortiums that manage kind of the greater Sacramento, or not the greater Sacramento, the greater California area. And I'll actually tee it up to Scott Adams with the California Department of Technology to speak on this more.
Oh, well, thank you very much for inviting me into the space. And I wasn't quite planning on being a speaker. I was really just excited to learn more about the very exciting work that's being done by the multiple partners and entities here. I think that very graciously we'll take advantage of the opportunity to just underscore and highlight that, you know, both the Department of Technologies and the California Public Utilities Commission are coordinating on the digital equity plan development and the BEAD plan development over the next several months and year, and that exciting opportunity once those plans are complete to bring the additional dollars to achieve broadband for all. Just wanted to extend an invitation to all of you to partner with us in the development of both of those plans, and would like to share additional information through the organizers here about the multiple ways that folks can participate in the process. We know you all are busy doing tremendous work in coordination and collaboration at the local and regional level. We are required to get granular feedback. So we have a number of virtual convenings. We have 6 outcome area working groups focusing on education, healthcare, workforce development, and would really love to hear folks share about the workforce development efforts that are going on next week. And wanted to just tee up, we are going to be working with local partners to do 20 engagement events across the state in every economic region. And so would love to you know, get together in the same room with you all and learn from you about what's working, because obviously there's a ton of great work that could help make up the state's asset inventory. The last 2 things that I wanted to mention is that I heard folks talking about surveys as part of our charge, you know, by the NTIA to develop a needs assessment and identify digital equity barriers. We're doing a statewide phone survey, but also have created an online survey that will be translated into 13 different languages. There will be, you know, audio questions for, you know, folks with literacy challenges, and some accessibility features built in, and that will also be optimized to be used on mobile phones. So when those go live, we would really appreciate your assistance in promoting that survey, and also, you know, suggest for folks that, you know, individual communities who don't have the resources to develop their own surveys, that feel free to use the survey that we're developing. And it also comes, we've built in some open source applications. So we will be providing an opportunity for households to do speed tests. So I could go on. I just appreciate the opportunity to share a bit what we're doing. We are really eager to partner with all of you to develop the state's digital equity and BEAD plans, which will really inform how those additional federal dollars can be made available to your communities to help your efforts to foster digital equity. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott. And Navreet will be sharing a little bit more information on this, but I just also wanted to thank you for letting us totally put you on the spot. Folks, Scott let us know that he might be joining our meeting today, and we get excited at any opportunity to have CDT in the room. So thank you, Scott, for letting us pick on you there, and we'll go ahead and move forward here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And then, of course, moving forward with all state announcements. So again, focusing on the state digital equity plan. So of course, as part of the plan, the California Department of Technology, as Scott has mentioned, is just trying to gain as much input as possible from all Californians. And so part of that plan is the CTT will be convening regionally to kind of host workshops and these events to help engage organizations and help receive input. And so the reason that the state digital equity plan is so important is kind of that is the foundation for kind of receiving our federal funds and also the state digital equity plan funds. And it also provides a layout. It provides a choice for, or an option for our kind of community to speak up, and a way for us to kind of prioritize and know what communities and in what ways we are going to kind of remove these barriers and address these barriers for several covered populations, and even how we're going to move forward with digital equity in several kind of key working areas. And so we're excited to announce that kind of Valley Vision through our Connected Capital Area Broadband Consortium is going to collaborate with CDT and host a digital equity planning event for the greater Sacramento region. And so this plan is for it to be around mid-May, but I'll actually pass it over to Kevin Flash, who is a steering committee member with CRCDI, to provide more details.
Thank you, Navreet. Appreciate that. And Scott as well. You know, I think it's really exciting when we begin to look at all the planning that's being done in preparation for the funding that's coming down, and the coordination and collaboration of the various groups. Listening to the city of Sacramento in their planning, and what Navreet mentioned, coordinating and cooperating with the state agencies to create that digital equity plan is very exciting. What we're targeting in on, as Navreet mentioned, is really a group of people in the region. About 200 individuals will be inviting and extending and inviting to this regional planning effort. We are hoping tentatively that it may end up to be in May. Right now, we're targeting a potential May 11th date that would be held in a central location in Sacramento, easily for both individuals to get to if they're driving in, or community members as well coming in, participating in that. You know, the interest is not just to get the leaders to come in, but also to get paired up with local community members in the various covered populations. And I think it's important to keep in mind who those covered populations are, and begin to reach out to them and to be able to draw them in to have this conversation, so that we really understand that our plan is meeting their needs and their interests to be really shift that digital equity needle in there. If there's any more questions coming up, I think we'll be hearing a little bit more solidly about the date, the location, and the times of that. But in general, going to be mid to late May, probably May 11th, and in a central location in the greater Sacramento area.
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin. And then again, just letting everyone know that anyone involved with Valley Vision, connected through our newsletter, connected through our coalition, or even our consortium, will be notified as the event details become more solidified. So just letting that know that everyone will continue to stay engaged, and we will engage as many folks and organizations and leaders and community members as we can. And kind of just moving on to this and touching on this, just want to resurface what the covered populations are. Of course, we do have an idea, but just touching back on it again, the covered populations are identified as these 8 individual groups. So individuals who live in covered households, aging individuals, incarcerated individuals, veterans, individuals with disabilities, individuals with language barriers, and just low levels of literacy in our English learners, individuals who are members of racial and ethnic minority groups, and then individuals who primarily reside in rural areas. And then of course, we know that community members aren't just stuck to one covered population group. Many of our covered population individuals can encompass several of these. So just very important to note that these do kind of work together. And so when we create these digital equity plans and when we share these conversations, there's large room for collaboration. And then as a part of that, besides the state digital equity planning event, there are virtual ways to get involved. So next week, as part of kind of the outcome area working groups, there will be several events hosted by the California Department of Technology to gain this input for these several working groups. So the education working group will be this upcoming Tuesday. And then again, digital literacy, which Valley Vision will be attending the digital literacy and workforce working group events. So respectively, those both will be on Wednesday. The health one will be on Thursday, along with the essential services, accessibility, and civic engagement. And then the tribal collaboration will be the week after next. So these are important events to know. All registration links are kind of available at the Broadband for All events tab, which I'll link right now. And then also if you scroll all the way down, they will be seen right there. And add that in.
Thank you so much, Navri. And as you've mentioned, again, our team will be attending both the digital literacy and inclusion working group, as well as the workforce and economic development working group. So you are welcome to join us there, or if there are others that are more relevant to you. I know we have a number of education folks in the room, tribal folks, civic engagement, etc. So just wanting to put the opportunity out there for you all. The funding that our region receives will be as a result of some of these working groups and this event. And so we really want to highlight the status of what's going on in our region and give as much information as we can. So input from you or from folks that you work with is incredibly valuable. Does anyone have any questions on that? I know that there are some things that are still emerging, and we'll definitely be reporting that out as they come. But I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts on that, any questions, and let me monitor the chat as well. I think some folks have been commenting. Any thoughts on that? Or are you eagerly anticipating updates from us, which we will definitely be providing? Okay, I hear crickets. I think we're all thinking. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say we're so humbled and honored that you're just the thoughtful approach that you're using to promote the various opportunities for people to engage. And I think the call to action that I would make here is that I've just been amazed at the wonderful work that's going on in the region by the partners here. And part of the intention of these statewide working groups is to set up like a statewide table where folks from across the state could both share expertise and learn from their peers in other parts of the state. So understand that folks are time constrained, but I think any of the folks that we've heard from today and who've been running the chat, if you have the time, we would love to partner with you and learn from you.
Thank you so much. Well, if folks have any additional questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat.
Okay, Caitlin, I want to reiterate something that I did put in the chat, is that at last week's Educating Careers Conference, it was announced that the Department of Education is in the process of updating their career technical education standards as far as on industry sectors. So that is an opportunity to provide input of digital skills that should be incorporated in various industry sectors in those new career technical education standards that are being worked on to be adopted.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I recommend folks who are involved in that go ahead and attend both of either that education working group or the digital literacy and skills group. I'll keep an eye on that as well and try and bring that forward where appropriate as well. But thank you for mentioning that, Mark. I appreciate it. But any further questions while we have Scott or others in the room? Okay, I'm going to keep it rolling here. And keep to my promise of getting you out by lunchtime. I hope you have something hot and delicious waiting for you. But before that, I want to let you all know about our next quarter's coalition meeting, which will be Friday, June 9th, same time, 11 to 12:30 p.m. We'll keep you apprised on topics and things that come about, but I wanted to go ahead and drop the registration, or thank you, Renee, from our team for doing that. You can go ahead and register for our next coalition meeting, and we'll be sending up some updates about that. We like to keep things relevant to current events, so I'm excited to surprise you in June. But thank you all so much for joining us today. I think our team is going to go ahead and stick on, so feel free to stay on if you have any additional questions for us. Otherwise, I will give you precisely 11 minutes back on your Friday to have some lunch and download all of the great information shared today. So we will go ahead and share out some of these post-meeting materials. Following this event, you'll receive them on Monday. But thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great weekend, and stay dry and safe in the atmospheric river that we're all about to go through. Hopefully everyone is good.